Let's talk about gentrification, affordable housing, rent control, and all that. Okay. Uh, First, we have to understand the context of what a living wage is. All right. I'm not against people having nice, nice, and maybe even slightly excessive homes and residences. I really am not. But when the excessiveness goes to the point of insanity, where the pricing of the excessive housing market exceeds that of any rationale, where more and more square footage and acres of housing is turned out to the excessive range, and you throw these terms like rent control and affordable housing, when many of these excessive housing is nothing more than secondary or just they stay empty as a way to store away potential for a potential future where they can make more money. That just doesn't make any makes absolutely no sense. When the cost of building these places are excessively high and makes no rational sense, and then the pricing for these excessive homes exceeds even what was paid to build them. Well, that just doesn't make any rational sense. I hear about all this, but we also hear about how living wage has not risen with productivity. We hear about how we're being priced out of out of homes, rentals, and all that other stuff. But the thing is nobody seems to include the cost of utilities, the hikes in taxes. Nobody seems to include the cost of food, the cost of medicine, the cost of everything. Everything is going up, and we, the 90%, are burdened with this onerous cost, an illegitimate, insane, onerous cost. So we talk about this. It doesn't matter if you put rent control. It doesn't matter what label you put on it. When the price of those that are supposed to be feasible and reasonable for the 90% is already too high. Look, we should have it so that we work a 40-hour job and we pay a quarter. A quarter. So one month worth of our wages, that should be the max that goes to paying for rent, for mortgages. And even that is kind of high, well, in my opinion. But at least you have 3/4 of your wages that can go to other things. But the reason why I say it's still high, because you still have to pay for your utilities. You still have to pay for You still have to pay for your food costs. You have to pay for transportation. You have to. So you have all these extra costs, and thereby you can't bank for a rainy day. You can't save for a rainy day. You can't save for an emergency. You can't save for retirement. You can't do any of that. I like to point out to a lot of people, like, I collect early Social Security. I get like $1,300. But, and with the back pay from my Social Security, I was able to buy this house that I live in. I paid $38,000 for it. I paid it outright with that back pay and a little assistance from my father. But the thing is with the taxes I have to pay, with the cost of food, with the cost of utilities, with the cost of heating, cost of all of that, I can't really swing it. And yet I make too much money to qualify for anything here in Pennsylvania. I can't qualify for anything. No assistance whatsoever. I make too much money. I get about $500 a month to work with. The rest of it is held by my father to pay for my taxes, pay for my heating, my utilities. But I'll show you what my house looks like. How do I fix anything? I don't qualify for assistance to make my house energy efficient. I don't qualify for anything to fix up even the house so that it's actually livable. I don't qualify for any of that. But you have people paying $1,000 for a one-bedroom apartment, or $1,000 for a freaking studio, a 500 square foot studio. That's outrageous. When you don't make when you work and you barely make $1,000 a month, how the hell is that possible? That means you have to work 2 to 3 jobs, full-time jobs. Or you need to have the mother and father working. And if you have an old enough child, you have to have them working. Those are the sort of issues. No wonder why we have food stamps. That's why you need food stamps. That's why you need all these other assistances. If we pay a living wage, if we're paid a living wage, and if we keep cost controls, meaning the excessive greed of the few who control everything that we buy, and we keep control of the pricing on homes, apartments, condos, and all that other stuff, then we have a system where the living costs will not generate the stress, the anger, the fear, and all that entails, including the violent aspects. When we have responsible people who can understand the greater aspects on how to do policy, then we can have responsible, moral, ethical people, and not just criminals who get into positions for policies, who are just working for themselves. And that is the situation. This whole idea of trying to fix one thing at a time and not really fixing it because you haven't touched on the root cause of it. And the root cause is we have an explosion of irrational criminal behavior of putting prices that are extortionary. The whole system is a predatory system where criminals get the lion's share, and those that are owned by private citizens who are not multimillionaires, who do not own hundreds of properties, who are just trying to put a little bit more into their pockets, well, they now have to be predatory as well. So it's just a vicious circle. So people that have that would be decent can't afford to be decent because they can't. Because the system is created so that greed is placed up here. You may not be technically greedy, and you may own a couple of rental properties, but you're forced to be greedy because you can't otherwise have that rental property. And you can't afford to fix up that rental property. You can't afford to be anything but a slumlord. And if you do, you need to buy more. But you still need to be more greedy. And it's not greed that runs through these smaller private people who have rental property. It's to cover their expense and also to save for their retirement. And we should be able to retire without having to go through all these hurdles, without having to compromise our ethics, our morals, and more importantly, our consciousness. Because all this does is it breaks down our community, it breaks down our bonds, and it makes it's us against them. That's the mentality the system creates. And until we come to realize that it's going to continue to go on. That's what capitalism is. It's geared to give the criminally greedy the opportunity to become super predators onto the masses. That's what also generates people doing trophy hunting. Because now it becomes part of the capitalist system to show, oh, I'm so much, look how much better I am. I can do anything. Trophy hunting doesn't serve anybody. What it does is destroy our ecosystem. It destabilizes our ecosystem. It eradicates other life that we need, that is essential for our own existence. It's the same principle that allows these super predators to help make legislation for policies, while at the same time destroying our ecosystem, feeding a false media to propagate and allow the further destruction of the environment we need. That's essential. We don't need to build more housing that spreads out more, destroying more of the ecosystem. What we need is a more intelligent and cognitive logical way to build more housing without taking more acres and destroying more of the ecosystem. That's what we need. We need responsibility. We need ethics. We need morality. You can throw all that. But ultimately, the whole system promotes our extinction. And there are people like me out there who can throw out solutions, potential solutions, imaginative solutions that will well, no, not you, us, give us all reasonable, even a little slightly more than reasonable standards of living. So, as I said, we have to understand that the cost of living isn't just one thing. It's not simply the cost of housing. It's the cost. It's a whole gambit of cost, and how the gambit of cost exceeds what we can do, no matter how many hours we work. They always, Bernie Sanders and all these, they talk about a living wage, a $15 minimum wage. Well, that's great. But if you don't have any control on the cost, if you don't have any reasonable control on cost, then it's a moot point. It ultimately is not even a band-aid. It's not even a fix. It's not a solution. Not if the cost keeps escalating and going hyperinflation, because that's what it is. Everything that we purchase, everything we buy, everything that we have for an expense is hyperinflated. It's exceeding what we can generate, no matter how how hard of a worker we are. When everything is going up to the point of ridiculousness, you know, I know a lot of you have watched the movie Spaceballs. You remember the scene where they're in the ship, and they talk about different levels of speed, and then they go to ludicrous speed, and then one of the officers says, he goes, ludicrous speed. Well, that's what it is. It's completely ludicrous. You know, this and the suburban Knights that live in the upper middle class. You know, they make 100,000 or more, or they're making even 75,000. The problem is your bank accounts, your savings for retirement. You can't. You can't put enough savings. Which means that you try to play the stock market, and you try to find other avenues, which makes you predatory. And you're not intentionally trying to be predatory, but you're forced into it. And if you're informed about the stock market, you know the stock market is just a pyramid scheme, and it's basically a criminal action. That's what the stock market is. You're just passing money around into a thing where somebody else buys, because these electronic things, and people are telling you, oh, the stocks are increasing. Well, guess what? It's not actually generated from anything real. It's generated from people just betting and tossing money back and forth to each other. It's nothing more than a shell game. And the only winners are the ones selling the crap. So, ultimately, it comes down to one thing. We need to have reasonable, logical system of controls. As I said, doesn't exclude people having slightly excessive standards. But when it reaches the realm of complete ludicrousy, of utter insanity, and that small number starts to buy up and consume, thereby controlling everything, where thousands to millions can be without a residence or a home, that is outright criminality. That's outright treasonous. And the argument of, oh, it's a system, well, guess what? They're the ones that help make the system. They're the ones that help to promote it. That's criminal. You can't not knowingly do this. In order to do something nefarious and malicious, you have to be conscious about doing it. Because there's no way not to, unless you are entirely and utterly insane. But being entirely and utterly insane means you're in a rubber room. Because insanity of that level cannot possibly let free to roam around, no matter what society you live in. But that also is an indictment on us, because where our level is reaching towards that insanity. So thereby any conscious, decent, and an informed society would understand about this insanity. But because we have been pulled and drawn into this insanity, it's become reality. It's become every day. We need to wake up, and we need to start being more conscious for ourselves as a whole. And we need to start putting the brakes on these actions that is leading us like the lemurs of fable, where they do this run and they run right over the cliff, basically committing suicide, because that's what it is. That's what it is. So ask yourself: do you want to be lemurs? And just follow the herd right over the cliff, committing suicide? Or do you want to be reasoned, logical people who have the humans who have the potential to evolve and take us away from being animals? Because we are, for all of our potential, we are not using it. We are acting like the very animals we so look down on, that we so like to say that we're better than. Because for all the clever tools like our smartphones and other stuff like that, and our vehicles, we're still all acting like the animals that we snare at. The animals which are essential, the plants which are essential to our future. Because the animals, the plants, and everything else is a part of the environment, which is essential for our existence well into the future. Well. Because right now, we're not. We don't have a future thousands of years ahead. We don't even have a century. Hell, we don't even have a half a century. All right, man. I'm done.